morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Jill Poremba, your worship associate for this morning, and the service today will be led by our minister, the Reverend Eileen Casey-Campbell. Thank you to everyone on this morning's worship team, also including music by Bill. Generational service. The Wiggle Zone is open for anyone who needs it. It is packed. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway. And whether it's your first visit or your 1000th, we are glad that you came. This service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. We will plan on continuing with hybrid worship services throughout the church year, so you can join us here each week in person or on Zoom or later on YouTube. To help us connect better with our friends watching from home, please turn around and give a wave to the camera. At the end of the service, we will invite our friends on Zoom to turn on their cameras and return the wave. I have a few announcements to share with you today. Thank you to all that helped with the preparation, activities, and cleanup for our Easter egg hunt and Earth Fair yesterday. We will not be having our usual Fourth Friday mindful meal this month. Next week, on April 27th, we will have a brief hybrid meeting of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee immediately following the service to prepare for the blooming season, and then to complete our spring highway cleanup of 5 and 20. Please plan to join us for one or both. Hard hats, vests, gloves, trash grabbers, and bags will be provided. Jody Brown is on the nominating committee for the New York State Convention of Universalists, and we were looking to fill 2 positions there, one on the nominating committee and one on the board. If you are interested in either position, would just like more information, or know someone else who might be interested, please contact Jody. Her phone number and email are in the chat and on the announcement sheet in the back. Are there any other announcements for the good of the community?
Good morning, everybody. Nice full house. As part of our Earth Day celebration yesterday, we had a bring a house plant, take a house plant thing, and we have a lot of house plants still left in the back. We have extra soil in the basement and little pots outside, so if you'd like to take a clipping of one of the things that's in a pot, you're welcome to take a clipping. There's clippers back there. If you want to take any of the little seedlings, take them as they are. If you have any questions, I'll be in the back to help direct that. And we also have a lot of seeds. So, are the seeds on the table? And the seeds are also on the table. So after service, feel free to peruse and take, please.
Good morning. I'm Danielle Lyon, the worship coordinator. And last week we mentioned that Thomas and I are usually in the back doing the camera and the Zoom, but there's a few Sundays that one or both of us won't be here, and it's always good to have more people know how things work. So if you're the kind of person who's comfortable on Zoom and wouldn't mind getting here on the earlier side between 9:30 and 9:45 on a Sunday morning to get things turned on, learn how they work, and get a little practice in, I can teach you how it all goes. So please come and find me if you're the kind of person who thinks that you could help out with our virtual side of the worship experience.
What are the dates, Danielle?
The first date is May 18th, so we've got about a month.
Let Pat go first. Okay.
Good morning. I'm Pat Mells, and I'm on the stewardship team. We've been running a pledge drive. Today was our target day to be done, but I have a secret for you. It's never really done on the target date. I even got a pledge as I was coming into the church this morning. So we're making progress. The good news is the line of dancers in the back is growing. We're up to about $72,000. That still puts us about $8,000 short of our goal. But thanks to your pledges and also a special gift a member made, we are making real progress, and I'm optimistic that we can reach our goal. So thank you all who have pledged, and if you would like to pledge, see me or look at the weekly announcements. The information as to how to pledge is there. Thank you.
I have one last announcement for you this morning, which is that we had some eggs left over from our Easter egg hunt yesterday. And so maybe if you're really astute, you've noticed that they are hidden in the church. And so I want to let you know that you may look with your eyes during the service and not with your hands. And when the service is over, when the chalice is out and Bill starts to play the last notes on the piano, you may look with your hands and hunt for some extra eggs. There's at least one egg per kid, I think. And I'm sure you will all be careful with the kids who are littler than you and make sure everybody gets to find at least one.
As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. We now enter a space of worship. Could I have my 2 chalice lighters? I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
About the question of why do we come to church anyway? And on this morning, on Easter morning, I was thinking about this really hard. We did a celebrations and ceremonies survey earlier in the year so that we could get a better idea of which rituals and celebrations and ceremonies you all, our congregation, felt really passionate about and which ones you were like, meh, on. And I can't tell you how meh you were on Easter. And yet, we had to pull extra chairs out of the basement at 10:02. So why are we here anyway, right? And in thinking about this, I was thinking about an interview that I saw with Ira Glass recently. Do we know Ira Glass from This American Life? And he was talking about how when he used to live in Manhattan, he lived next door to Union Theological Seminary. And he would walk his dog early in the morning in the park across the street, And he would do that at the same time as a Union seminarian. And they kind of got to know each other, and they would say a casual hello. And then one morning, the seminarian started to chat with him and said, "So what do you do?" And Ira Glass said, "Well, I sort of invented this new way of doing radio, where you tell a story, and then you draw some meaning out of the story, and then you tell another story that's linked to that meaning, and you draw some meaning out of that, and then you weave that meaning together in a third story." And it's this like innovative way of telling stories and doing radio. And the seminarian said, "Oh, that's a sermon." And Ira Glass was like, no, I don't think it is. I invented it. It's like a new thing that I came up with. I'm pretty sure, like, I've won some awards for it even." And the seminarian said, "No, that's how they teach us how to write sermons next door. And it's actually not new at all. Like, if you read the Bible, that's how Jesus preaches." And Ira Glass was like, "Well, I'm Jewish." And the seminarian said, "Well, okay, but so was Jesus," as Abby pointed out. And he wasn't known for like his novel style of preaching, and rabbis were preaching like that a couple of thousand years ago and still are. And Ira Glass said, "Well, I'm not very observant." And the seminarian said, "Apparently." And I think even if Ira Glass didn't know it, and the seminarian did, this is why we come to church on Sunday mornings, and whenever we come to church, on Easter, on any regular old Sunday, on a Friday night, we come to church because this is what's the most fundamental thing about being human, right? We tell stories that are true and stories that are truer than true, and we pull meaning out of those stories, and then we link them with other stories, and we pull meaning out of that and link it to the next story in a chain, in a tapestry that spans human time, right? This is why we come to church. So this morning, in a slightly different service from what you're used to, very little preaching, almost no sermon at all, we give you 3 stories on a theme, that theme, salvation. Stay with us. And would you rise in body or in spirit and sing our opening hymn together, number 266 in your gray hymnal. Now it's time for a story. If you're a small person, or even if you're a larger person, and you want to come up close to hear the story a little better and maybe help me tell it, you can walk to the front anytime you're ready. now or during this story. You can bring your grown-up with you, and you could go back to your grown-up anytime you need to. This morning's first story is the story of Noah's Ark, which I'm guessing is a story lots of us have heard before. Does anybody know about the story of Noah's Ark? Yeah, some folks know about this story. No? Okay. Lots of us know about it because it is an ancient story. But go ahead and sit, and then everybody else can see too. Here we go. It's a really ancient story. It's actually more ancient than the story that we usually tell. Because the story that we usually tell, which comes from Jewish scripture, came from some other stories from some other peoples who told it first. And it's actually a story that was told all around that region for millennia, even before it ever got written down in the form that we tend to tell it in. It's a retelling of a retelling of a retelling. Anybody ever play the game? Yeah, anybody ever play the game Telephone?
I played with illustration.
That's
like telephone but with illustration.
Yeah, it's sort of like that, where every time the story gets told, it takes on new meaning for the people who are telling and who are listening. And so it goes like this. I need a helper. Can anybody, yes, come on up, Oren. Oren is Noah. Here's our Noah. A wise, kind-hearted, good old man. Right? And I need a God. Anybody feeling like a God today? Come on up, Kelly, you have your hand up first. Okay, here's our God. There will be lots of chances to help out in stories today. And the rest of you will be animals. We'll get to that in a minute. And so God is looking down at the world. We're picturing God, in this case, based on a storm deity. So we're picturing him living up in the clouds. And he's got a lot of anger, like storm deities tend to. And he's like Zeus, but in this story he has a different name. But we're just going to call him God. He's looking down on the world and he's like, you all do not know how to act right. Yeah, he's really judging some corrupt behavior down there from his storm cloud. And he's like, you know what? Just like sometimes you might do with an art project that goes not the way you were planning it to, I'm going to wipe this slate clean and try again. But he doesn't want to start totally from scratch. So he calls out to this one man he sees who he thinks he's living pretty well. So he's like, Noah, build an what? An ark. Yeah, which, let's pause the story for a minute there. Weird word, right? Because have you ever heard of a boat called an ark except for this one? Yeah, it's not actually a word for boat. We're going to come back to that later. But hold on to that. Yeah, why did we call it that?
It's not a word for an ark?
An ark is not a word that actually means boat, but that's what they call it in this story. We're going to come back to that later. So he tells Noah, bring your family, bring like 2 of every animal, should be easy, gather them all up, put them on this ark, this giant boat that you also, by the way, have to build. So you're busy, Noah. You're building an ark, right? You're hammering wood, you're coating it with pitch resin so it won't leak, and then you got to get 2 of every animal in the world, except probably fish, I guess. They're probably fine, right? Yeah. Okay, and so animals, you ready, animals? You're all coming onto the boat, get on the boat, and when I say 3, you're going to make the noise of whichever animal you chose to be, and maybe all of you will too. And 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness, was it loud on that boat? Yeah. And so everybody climbed aboard the boat, the animals, Noah, Noah's family, the rest of the people, and the non-chosen pairs of animals. Out of luck. And God starts, you can be right here on the boat. We're going to imagine this is the boat. And then God starts to send some rains. And you can sit down on the boat just so that everybody else will imagine we're all on the boat. We're all the animals, right? So, and then God starts to send rain. Yes. Rain, storms. Remember, we were imagining this is, at one point in the story, way back in the earliest bits of the telephone, a Babylonian storm deity. So he's really good at making storms. And he's sending these storms, and the rains cover the entire earth. And for, who knows how long in this story?
It's either 30 years or...
Close. It's 40 days and 40 nights. But that really is just a number that in this tale means a super long time. Like a long time to wait. And maybe we lost track of days in there, but we're going to call it 40. the waters covered the whole earth. And Noah's like, it's got to be
Wouldn't it fall?
done by now.
Wouldn't it fall on the ark and sink?
You would think, but in this story, the ark does not sink, Noah. And Noah starts sending out birds. So you're going to like throw a bird out, see if it comes back. They're not coming back. But finally, after 40 days and 40 nights, Noah sends out a dove. Throw the dove out into the air. The dove flies off, and then the dove comes back with, in this story, an olive branch in its beak, which signifies to Noah the waters are receding, there's new growth in the land. And so finally, after such a long time, Noah and his family see a rainbow appear in the sky. The storm is over. The waters are receding. Thank you, storm god. And they decide this is a sign. This will not happen to us again. We're going to take it as a sign. And they did. And that is where we'll end our story. Thank you, helpers.
Receding means there's a tsunami.
Not receding so fast as a tsunami. The water is slowly trickling away. Let's call it that. Okay, round of applause for our helpers. And I'm going to ask our helpers to go back to the wiggle zone or back to your seats as soon as you're ready.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church in its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. And this week, we would like to thank Marty for bringing in the daffodils every spring that adorn the windows here. If you do end up bringing any of these home, please make sure to bring back the vase for next year so that he has a place to put them. Thank you. People interested, in finding out more about bringing daffodils. We'll skip that part. 1/4 of our plate collection for the muddy season will go to our service partner, Fruition Seeds. Fruition believes that each seed, like each of us, is in the world to change the world. They have transformed from selling and shipping seeds to sharing regionally adapted seeds, as well as the tools, inspiration, and insight for all to thrive and cultivate gift culture together. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket, or by one of the options on your screen. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering.
Friends, this weekend we welcome 8 new members and their families to our congregation. It is a 10%, a little more than 10% increase in our membership. Yay! Yeah. We are so grateful to have them among us. And I want to lift up that we are not only a place of transformation, which welcomes them in, We are a place that is and will be transformed by them. So with great joy, I will ask our new members to come forward as I call their names with their willing children and stand up here in front of our chalice. So Matt and Carrie and your willing children, if whichever children are willing is what I mean by that. Drew. You can stand.
I guess we're standing behind it. She said in front.
Yeah. Emily and Dominic. Terrell. Deborah. And Sally cannot be with us this morning, but has also recently joined. And I want to say to all of our new members, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. Having earlier signed our membership book and made pledges of their time and resources to the furtherance of our congregation's mission, our new members have already done their portion of the joining process. And now it's up to the rest of us to do our part. So I ask you for 3 commitments as a way of welcoming and connecting ourselves to these new members. Our current members, I ask you, do you, as a community of hope, promise to stand and work beside these new members as we all seek to envision a more just world? If so, please respond by saying, we do. We do. And do you, as a community of healing, promise to do your part in making this a place where these new members can bring their joys and their sorrows, their struggles and their celebrations? We do. And finally, as a community of heart, do you offer these new members the freedom to love and listen to the sacred, experience wonder, and make meaning as their hearts and their consciences lead them to? We do. And finally, we offer a gift in celebration of new membership, which Jill is starting to hand out already. Small chalices for your home altars or your kitchen windowsills. The chalice, as a symbol of our faith, began as a symbol of the Unitarian Service Committee during its resistance work in Europe in World War II. It was meant to signify anywhere people resisting the wave of fascism that the warmth and sanctuary and light of hope in dark times would always be here. And may it always be for you. Jill's also handing out some seeds because we hope that your growth with us is just beginning, that you will plant seeds in this congregation that will continue to grow for generations. And so I say to our new members, welcome to the fullness of membership in our community. It is so good to be together on this journey. May our way be lit by the warm glow of community, the bright light of truth, and the fire of commitment. Amen. And as our new members make their way back to their seats, would you all rise in body or in spirit and sing together our next hymn number 344 in your gray hymnal?
Promise to be made, which rings that
time for another story. And just like our last story, if you would like to come forward and sit up front so that you can listen better, you can walk up to the front at any time during the story. And I may need some helpers for this story too. And this is the story of baby Moses. Yes, you can be a helper. Okay, yes, this is our first helper. Come on up here. And does anybody know that it was Passover last week? Yes. And any idea what that's all about? There's a story that's at the heart of Passover. Maybe if in your family you celebrate Passover, you might know this story. You think you know it? What do you think it is, Oren?
It's when Jesus was walking to Jerusalem or something.
That was a story I bet they told in your mom's church last week. Jesus walking into Jerusalem, which is Palm Sunday, but it was also Passover last week, both at the same time. So a different holiday where you maybe heard the story of Moses and the exodus of Hebrews from Egypt, right? Is that ringing any bells? That's okay if it's not. We're going to tell some of that story now. Just the beginning part that usually gets skipped at the Seder, because Seders are long enough. And so the beginning part goes like this. During the time of the Hebrews' enslavement in Egypt, which, this is a truer than true story, which probably never happened, but this was a story for the listeners and the tellers who were currently enslaved somewhere else. So it was important to tell it that way, and they understood the themes. There was, I need a silent helper, is that okay? And you have a very important role because there was a pharaoh. This is our pharaoh. Can you be the pharaoh? And what is a pharaoh anyway? Yes.
You know how, like, in the medieval, there's like kings?
Yeah.
That's kind of like what pharaohs.
Very good explanation. It's like a king. So this is basically a king. We call him a pharaoh. And this new pharaoh was a baddie. He was pretty mean. And he looked around his kingdom, and he felt like there's too many Hebrews here. The Hebrews were, in the story anyway, the people that that Pharaoh had enslaved. And he was like, they're having too many babies. There are too many of them. And he started to get nervous that if there were suddenly many, many Hebrews, they might get together and overthrow the Pharaoh or even escape, which, spoiler, we know happens at the end of this story, the part we're not going to tell. And so Pharaoh made a decree. He told all of the midwives who helped deliver Hebrew babies, if it's a girl, go ahead and leave her alone. If it's a boy, if there's a son born, kill that baby. Bad, right? You would never do that in real life.
Both boys and girls.
Yeah. All genders are fine here, but for the bad pharaoh, this is how we know he's bad, right? Because he made that very bad decree. Yeah.
If one transgender kid in my track.
Yeah. And okay, so here's what's happened. He told this to the midwives. I need 2 midwives. Anybody want to be a midwife? Yes, Oren's a midwife. You and Rory's a midwife. And we don't say their names in this story a lot, but they do get names in this story, and their names are Pua and Shipra. Pua and Shipra, 2 midwives who were delivering all the Hebrews' babies. What do you think they did when Pharaoh told them, if it's a boy, kill it?
They didn't kill it.
They sure didn't. They hid the boys. They defied the Pharaoh. And there was a boy born to a woman, and this is the baby who's later going to be named Moses, just to give you all a heads up. And the midwives did not kill that baby. They kept him safe. And so we're going to pretend. Here's your pretend baby. And they told Pharaoh's mother, I have a plan. Maybe you should follow this plan. Does anybody want to be Pharaoh's mother? Kind of? Okay, we're going to imagine Pharaoh's mother's right here. And they said, you should send this baby down the river because they'll come looking for him. But maybe he'll make it if you send him down the river. And she put him in does anybody know? A basket. But do you know what the word is in the original story as far as we have it? It's a Hebrew word, teva. And we've talked about this word already today. It's the same word, teva, that we said was called an ark earlier. We translated it as ark in the last story. In this story, we call it a basket, teva. She put him in a basket, a teva, which probably was more like a box. And she coated it with pitch, like Noah did, with sticky pine resin, like Noah did to the teva in his story, and she sent it down the river. And then, now one of you midwives, can you pretend to be Moses' sister? Okay, this is Miriam now. And Miriam, who was his big sister, walked through the reeds and went down the river and watched the basket to make sure it was safe until it came and landed in the reeds in front of an Egyptian's home. And not just any Egyptian, the Pharaoh's daughter. And the Pharaoh's daughter, her heart was warmed when she heard the crying of the baby. She wasn't as bad as her dad. She was like, we shouldn't kill babies, at least not this one. And she pulled the baby out of the river. This is where he gets the name Moses, pulled out of the water. She says, I'm going to call him Moses. But she was still like a really fancy lady, and back then they didn't raise their own children. And so she decided to adopt him, but she was like, I need someone to take care of him. And Miriam, who had snuck along the whole way and was very clever, said, I know a Hebrew slave who could take care of him for you. And the Pharaoh's daughter hired Moses' own mother to take care of him, and that is how he got to be raised by his own family and survived Pharaoh's decree. And that is where we end this story, and you can make your way back to your seats. Thank you so much for your help. Now is the time in our service for centering and meditation, followed by some shared silence. We remind ourselves, as always, that by shared silence we mean the absence of grown-ups talking to one another so that we can listen more closely to the sounds of life, to the wind in the trees outside, to the wiggles and giggles of our children, to the breath of the neighbor in the seat beside us, to the workings of our own hearts. So I invite you to turn inward now. Maybe take a deep breath. If you're in the wiggle zone, maybe you find some space for yourself and even lie down on the floor and let your eyes fall closed so that your imagination turns on. Wherever we're sitting, we will let our bodies sink into our seat, our feet sink into the floor, our shoulders sink away from our ears, and feel held by this good earth. By the waters of Babylon, a long ago poet wrote, we sat down and wept, and we remembered Zion. How can we sing our old songs in the new land? And somehow, out of the swirling waters of the deep, the world is born. From the lightless void of space, there is a bang, a whole universe. Enclosed in a shadowy womb, we become. Beneath the dank, wet earth, hope is getting ready to emerge. And in the dark of an empty tomb, something is stirring. Precisely when we find ourselves wailing at the river, wandering in the wilderness, weeping in the dark, we are being born and reborn, and only in the shadows of the empty spaces can we create a prayer, a song, a resurrected world. Amen. Now it is time for our final story. And I don't need any help to tell this story, but if you'd like to come up front to listen and watch a little more closely because looking helps you listen, that's still okay. This is the story of Henry Box Brown, the man who mailed himself to freedom. And some of it might be a little bit truer than true, but this is actually a true story. Henry Brown was born into slavery in Virginia in the 18-teens. And there is very little known about his childhood because we don't have very good records of it. But we know that he married a woman named Nancy as a young adult, and they had 3 children. Henry's world changed when a cruel enslaver sold his wife and children away to another plantation. Henry could not see or contact them or even know where they were. And that changed something inside of Henry. It made him fiercely desperate to be free. Henry was in a bit of a unique position in that his enslaver had leased his time to a factory in town that paid him a small wage. So he had a very little bit of money and access to people with freedom. So with some abolitionist friends, Henry hatched a plan for freedom. Do we know what abolitionist means? No, Ewan doesn't. Does anybody? Yeah, Rory. What does abolitionist mean? You didn't think I'd call on you. Can somebody help? Well, I'll help out. An abolitionist was and is someone who opposes the enslavement, the bondage of humans. All right, so they were against that whole idea of slavery. And Henry had some abolitionist friends that he made in the factory, and they had other abolitionist friends across the country. And so he made a plan. In 1849, when the day of his escape came, his accomplices nailed him in a wooden shipping crate that was 3 feet by 2 feet by 2.5 feet. A grown man. Inside he had with him a woolen blanket, a flask of water, and a sleeve of crackers. And using Henry's small savings to pay the postage, this network of helpers mailed the box to a collaborator, an abolitionist in Philadelphia, where slavery was against the law. Henry's box traveled for 2 days by wagon, by railroad, by steamboat, by wagon again, railroad again, a ferry, another railroad, and finally a delivery wagon. Before it arrived, it took 2 days and 3 nights. And when it finally arrived on the doorstep of Quaker abolitionist Passmore Williamson, Passmore opened the box, and miraculously, Henry was alive. He emerged from the box on the 3rd day, a free man. Henry Box Brown worked the rest of his life toward the liberation of every person from slavery, which he did see happen during his lifetime. And at the end of his days, he said this about his spectacular journey in the darkness of that box. If you have never been deprived of your liberty as I was, you cannot realize the power of that hope of freedom, which was to me indeed an anchor to the soul, both sure and steadfast. And this is the end of our 3rd story. So now I want to ask, because we're thinking today about why do we do Easter anyway, right? Where most of us probably didn't show up today because we're holding on to hope for some kind of miraculous or literal resurrection, although maybe some of us are. Why are we here? I want us to remember the 2 funny words we talked about in our first stories that are actually the same word, teva, right? There aren't many words in the Jewish Bible that are borrowed from ancient Egyptian, maybe only a couple, and that's one of them. The word teva, which is probably best translated as a box in those stories, and we translate to English as ark and then basket, is only used in those two stories in Scripture. And its meaning, its root meaning in ancient Egyptian, was not just any box, but a sarcophagus, a coffin, a box where a dead body would go. It was probably a bit of a nod to the type of resin that coated the ark, the basket, and Egyptian sarcophagi to make them watertight. But we have to assume, given that the Hebrews had ample words for basket and boat and box, even a different word of their own for coffin, and one for the plant resin that coated all of these boxes, that the choice to call these vessels after the coffins of their oppressors was on purpose. It was, I think, a way of planting hope, a way that people could say to one another, things were so dire once, back during this story's time. It was like being laid in the coffin of our oppressors, and yet we lived. We survived. We came out of the box freer than we went in. It was a way of saying, people are not supposed to survive such things. And here we are on the other side of it. Usually, on this particular Sunday, we tell a story that we have only alluded to today, of a dissident, a rebel rabbi who trash-talked the empire and was executed for it. And the storytellers, of the stories we have anyway, say his body was placed in a tomb, a box, if you will, for 3 days. And on the third day, they tell us his friends found the tomb empty. Like all of our stories today, they weren't reporting on facts. They weren't there when it happened. All of the stories that we have were written a couple of generations later. Any facts are mostly gossip and guesses, a game of telephone, and lots of editorial additions. But the facts were not the reason for telling the story. The facts were never the important part, anyway, right? What the storytellers were doing was weaving the stories of their ancestors, the ark and the basket, together with their own experience. By recreating these stories that they carried about their people who had felt the threat of empire in their lives, they recontextualized their own story. Because what was happening for the storytellers of the empty tomb was that a generation after the actual Jesus' death, Rome was cracking down on Jewish dissidents in Jerusalem, burned the one Jewish temple in the world to the ground, and they were worried. They held fear in their hopes and in their hearts, and they needed the hope that a story can give. That the weaving together of story to story to story can give. The tellers of Henry Brown's story did the same. They called Harriet Tubman the Moses of Maryland for a reason, because they wanted her deeds to be woven together with those stories. Did Henry Brown spend exactly 2 nights and emerge on the third day from his coffin of a box? Maybe. It's a little on the nose. But the facts of Henry Brown didn't matter as much as the weaving, as much as connecting his story to the stories of liberation that abolitionists like him knew and told all their lives. And now, going forth this morning, it's our turn to weave together meaning, to tell stories of people like Mahmoud Khalil, disappeared by the state for trash-talking power. And how will we tell that tale? How will we make his story matter? How will we weave it to the stories we already hold? How will it become truer than true? When Unitarian Universalists talk about salvation, which I did promise you was the theme of our 3 stories this morning, what we usually mean is not a miraculous resurrection of the soul after death, or reincarnation of a body, or evasion of hell, which I think probably none of us believe in Anyway, what we usually mean is a collective liberation, a world where everyone is free, all of us together. And the mode of salvation, when we mean that everyone should be free with no one left out, is connection. It is, as Ira Glass and people of faith everywhere know now, this thread of story and meaning connecting us to one another across every artificial divide that empire places between us, across time, even across the boundary of death. A good story, a story that cares more about truth than about facts, is the box in which hope is delivered. And may it ever be so. Amen.
The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called. The storm is raging, and so are we. The storm is raging, and so are we. The storm is raging, and so are we. This is where we're called to be. This is where we are called. The world is ready. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called.
I offer as a benediction these words from our community partner this season, Fruition Seeds, that weren't meant to be poetry, just part of a gardening email, but we find meaning wherever it is. Today we sow seeds, thousands of tomato seeds, because it's time to sow seeds. It's time to breathe our next breath. It's time to tell new stories. And we must. Each generation is both the product of everything that's come before and the possibility of everything that could be. Will you rise in body or in spirit and sing together our closing hymn, number 1018 in the Teal hymnal?
Go with me to that land.
If you are joining us on Zoom, now is the time to turn your camera on if you would like to wave goodbye. Please join with me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.